Hi everyone, my name is Kesley Anderson, and tonight's project will be a bowl cozy. So the materials we're going to be working with are 100% cotton um, fabric and 100% cotton batting and 100% cotton yarn. The thread, I said it's thread, 100% cotton thread. Now, the great thing about the bowl cozy is it is designed to fit this is a generic size for you. We're going to start off with a 10 by 10 piece of fabric and give it the form to hold and snug around a bowl using darts. So I've got a couple sizes of bowls here to work with, just to kind of give you some ideas of which bowls will fit in this. This is my standard house bowl, and that fits in very nicely. You can see if I put it in the microwave, I can just take it out with the handles and I won't burn myself touching the hot bowl. This one's a little bit smaller. It's more of a fruit size bowl. It doesn't fit as snug, but I can still use it in the microwave to heat up my soup. And then this bowl is a little bit taller. It fits in nice and snug, and you just have to be a little more careful with that. So whatever size bowl you're working with, if it's an average size bowl, like a cereal bowl or soup bowl, it should work in this 10 by 10 cozy. As you get comfortable making this size, I want you to think outside the box, because what if you have a little bit of a flatter bowl or you want something that's a little bit taller? By adjusting the size of your darts, you can have your bowl be wider or be taller. So this is a little cozy made with the 10 by 10 piece of fabric, and it holds a little pint size of ice cream. So at night when you're getting your ice cream out, your hands and fingers don't get cold. You can just put it in your pint size ice cream cozy. So that's what we're going to be making today. Now, to get started, the first thing we'll do is measure out and cut our fabric. My fabric is an overall print, so it is not a directional print. And I point that out because from a flat piece, we're forming our bowl cozy. If it's a small one like this, it might not make that big a difference if you have directional fabric. But when you're working with something taller like this, you want to have an overall design so that you don't get confused and end up with your design upside down, just as you're getting started, and then you can work with directional fabrics as you get more experience. So my first directional fabric is this nice ball with some acorns. I'm really ready for some acorn squash soup. And then I just chose a nice polka dot. The good thing about our design today is it is reversible. So you can go either direction. And if you have a family that likes to claim, oh, I use the red one, I use the blue one, you can always use some heat transfer vinyl and add names onto the bowl cozies or the ice cream. So why don't we go ahead and get started with cutting out our fabric to that 10 by 10 inch space size. So we're just going to begin, well, actually the first thing we need to do, of course, is iron our fabric. So I'm going to switch to my overhead camera here and grab, I have my iron on the side. So I'll grab that and we're going to iron out our fabric.
Hey,
And just,
Kelsey. Hey,
yeah.
Kelsey, can you allow your overhead view?
Oh, sure. Yep. Let me slide that over. Okay. So there we go. Bring that over a little bit more. How's that?
Looks good.
All right. So do you have that one pinned, the overhead?
I sure do.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm just going to give it a nice quick press on the selvage edge. So your selvage edge is the edge of the fabric that has that finished side to it. The raw edge is the side that is cut. So I'm just going to start with one selvage edge, and then I'll lay out my next fabric on the selvage edge. Sometimes your selvage edges are nice and are clean, and then other times they might be a little fuzzy, and that's okay. I'm just going to line up my edges here on my ironing pad. Now, if you have an ironing board, You can use your ironing board. If you don't have an ironing board yet, maybe you're just a beginner sewer, or you maybe don't even have an ironing board. You can use a towel on your counter to, let me turn this overhead light on a little bit. There we go. You can just use a towel on the counter and use that for your ironing. So if you don't have a little press or an ironing board, you can just use that. Now I'm just getting any wrinkles out of my fabric, so I have a nice surface to start with. And then if you have a rotary cutter and a self-healing mat, you can use this to cut your fabric down into that 10 by 10 size. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut along the selvage edge. Now I will trim off this edge here because we don't need that, but I'm going to leave that on my fabric to get started. And then I'll trim that off. So if you have just a regular ruler, you can take a pencil and draw a line with your ruler. If you have a rotary cutter, and your ruler, you can use that. Now I would usually have a bigger acrylic piece here so I could line it all the way up and not worry about making my cut wrong. So I'm just going to actually end up using my metal ruler here, lining that up on the edge of my cutting mat and going up my fabric. I like to pull away the excess fabric to make sure I get a nice clean cut there, which I do. And I'm going all the way up past that 10-inch line because remember down here, we're going to trim this off. And then you're going to rotate everything around. Let me do that here. We'll just rotate our mat and our fabric around like this. And again, I'm just going to line it up. I have that line right there I can use. You can also use the line on the bottom. Either will work. And we're just going to go ahead and give it a trim along that line and remove any of that selvage edge. So you're going to need one of the lining fabric at 10 inches by 10 inches. And you'll also use one of your interfacing. Your lining. Now you may have two very decorative pieces, and that's okay because you can switch them in and out depending on how you feel and what pattern excites you. You can always just switch your bowl in and out. Okay, so oops, one just does not want to come off there. All right, so once you have your material, I have my outer piece and my lining piece is cut down to 10 by 10. Our next step is to take our heat and zap. I think that's what it's called. The name might be skipping me. We're going to use our batting. Now your batting also, you need it to be 100% cotton. The reason you want your batting to be 100% cotton is because you're going to put it in the microwave with your soup bowl and heat up your soup. So you want to have your batting, I'm going to turn this way so we get my measurements going the right way. You want your batting to be 100% cotton so you can put it in the microwave without worrying about it melting or anything like that. You can, like on my ice cream bowl, since I knew that that was not going to go in the microwave, I went ahead and just used like a fleece lining for that one. So if you're putting it in the microwave, you definitely want to use that 100% cotton. If you're not putting it in the microwave, you can certainly change that out and use something different. Okay, so there's my almost my 10 by 10 inch square here. Okay. Let's cut this one down. How's everyone doing? Are there any questions? Feel free to use that Q&A. If you're not crafting along with me, you may have your hands free and you may be asking questions that people who are cutting might want to know. So don't hesitate to ask a question as we're moving along if you have one. Now we need two of the batting pieces because we're going to attach the batting to both the front and the inside piece. So go ahead and cut two of your 100% cotton batting. Okay, so you grab this. I have another one already cut. I kind of tossed mine aside. Okay.
Would it be
so here
possible
we go.
for
Yeah.
somebody to hand sew this project?
We are going to be we are going to be sewing with the sewing machine. You can hand sew it. Yeah, absolutely, you can hand sew it. And Jody, yes, you are right. Your batting needs to be 9 by 9. I think I said 10 by 10. This is why I do step outs for all my steps as I go along, because inevitably I missed something. So yes, you are right. Your batting piece, I apologize, everybody. Your batting needs to be 9 by 9, and your fabric will be 10 by 10. And that's so that your batting will go inside your fabric piece. So your fabrics will be 10 by 10, double check, 10 by 10, and your lining piece, you want these to be, your batting to be 9 by 9. So 9 inches by 9 inches. Thank you for pointing that out, that you are correct there. And you need 2 of the batting, 1 of the interface, 1 of your lining, and 1 of your outer fabric. Now, once that's all the cutting we're going to do, so you can go ahead and tuck your mat and your rotary blade. You can tuck that away. You keep your scissors handy because we'll need that as we go, as we trim thread and things like that. Now, what we're going to do is you're going to place your batting in the middle of each of your fabrics, and you can use your whichever ruler you have to get your 1/2 inch on each side. So you want to place this so that it is within a 1/2 inch of each edge. So I like to use these little acrylic rulers so I can see where my 1/2 inch line is there, and I'm a 1/2 inch on that side. Once you have it, a 1/2 inch, you can just kind of go around on each side using your ruler, your tape measure, whatever you have, and make sure you're within a 1/2 inch. Now, the reason we're doing a 1/2 inch, our seams will be a 1/4 of an inch, but we want to make it easy when we turn because we have lots of points and turns here. So giving that 1/2 inch on the inside does make it a little bit easier. And go ahead, and once you've got that to the position with the 1/2 inch, go ahead and stick a pin in it to hold it. We will be drawing some lines on here, so just use your pins to hold that into place. Okay, and then we're going to repeat the same thing. Now you can see it. Mine's kind of a little cut crooked there, and that's not going to be a problem. I'm going to work around it. So don't worry if you got a little crooked. We can work around that a little bit. And by work around it, I mean, if you're not perfectly within that 1/2 inch line, it's not going to damage the overall look of your project, but your batting is a little bit forgiving. So you can just give it a little bit of a tug and make sure you have a 1/2 inch all the way around. So now I'm just going to go back and make sure I'm within a 1/2 inch all the way around, and I am. If I were like really wonky off here, I could just use my scissors and trim it down, but you wouldn't have to, it's not going to be a huge deal at the end of the day if you had got a little batting in your seam, in your side seam. So once you have each piece with your batting attached to the lining, then we're going to draw across each from corner to corner on each piece. Now, you won't see this in your finished project. This is just on the inside. So you can use something, you can use a pencil if you have a disappearing ink pen, and if you have like one of the Frixion, and I don't know how to say that, one of these pens, the colors dissolve on these pens, so these are great for marking your fabric. So whatever method you like, just take your ruler and go from one corner to the other corner. And you can, if you need to line up your batting, you can just kind of give it a little tug and make sure your corners all go across. You're going to go from corner to corner, and then we're just going to draw that line. Now, I like to use my pencil to do that too. So feel free, if you don't have a disappearing ink pen or something like that, you can just use your pencil. And like I said, it will not show up on the end. And if you don't get it, like if you don't get your batting exactly lined up with the corner, that's okay. We're gonna we're gonna sew this corner and give it a little bit more form. So if you're a beginner, like you do want to have everything line up in a perfect world, like you want your corners to line up there. But you know what? Don't kill yourself over getting there if you're just getting started and maybe this is your first sewing project. It's okay to, not have it be perfect. You'll love the outcome. You'll be so proud of it. You're gonna be like, I am ready for soup season here. Okay, so now I'm going to draw the X there, the cross there, and then I'll draw across this fabric here. And again, you can do this with a regular ruler, anything, any straight edge will do this line for you. Okay, now you will want to hold on to your ruler and your marking tool. We'll need that in another minute. And then we're going to go to our sewing machine and cut a stitch from corner to corner, making a quilt pattern on our piece. Now, if you really want to get fancy, feel free to do a lot. You could do more quilting design in it and do like a freehand quilting or anything like that. I'm just going to sew across like that. And if you're working with me, I advise that you do that with me. Now I do see I grabbed the wrong spool of thread, but I'm not going to go get a different spool of thread. So make sure make sure if you grab the all-purpose thread, make sure you have your 100% cotton thread there. And then I'm just going to push this up here. Let me turn my camera just a little bit more down like this if I can. Is that a better angle? Everybody see? Let's see. You guys let me know.
Yeah, looks good.
So yes. Huh? Oh, is that good?
Yep, just saying you look good.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure because sometimes you just can't see. So I saw the question, is this a good project for beginners? I think it's a great project for beginners because the end results look a little bit more complicated than they appear. If you're having a hard time stitching a straight line, that's okay because you're not sewing a seam together right now. We're just stitching across and you have your line right there to follow. So on the foot, you can't see my foot. Let's see. Let me get this down a little bit lower. There we go. Okay. On the foot of your sewing machine, you have a little center mark, and this should be on most sewing machines. You'll have a little center mark right there. Get my little pointer here. You'll have a little center mark, and if you use that little center mark there, right in the middle, to follow this line, you'll be able to stitch straight. You also have markings on the plate, and you can use those to keep you straight. For something like this, though, I would use that little notch on your foot. Now, if you don't have to start right on the tippy tip of the corner, you can go down about 1/4 of an inch because this is just decoration and we're actually be sewing the tip in when we sew these together. So you can go down just a little bit and catch it and then start. I like to hold my bobbin and my overhead thread, my main thread, when I start. So I'll just start like that. And if it kind of bunches up a little bit, lift up your presser foot, go back down, and then let the feet do the work. All you're doing is guiding it. And once you get it in there and you're just guiding it, it's okay to give it a little bit more gas and run it right across. And then as you're coming to this line, just with your fingers, it's going to get a little bit further so you can see. With your fingers, just make sure that you're lining those corners up. So you'll notice I still only have the 2 pins in the piece, and that's okay. You don't have to pin it all the way across and do a whole bunch of pins that you have to worry about taking out. So I can lift my pressure foot and pull this fabric forward and start with my next piece here. So I'll do the same thing. I'll begin stitching it. And when I just before I get to that corner, I want to make sure that it's underneath and I'll go across again like this. Now I am using, my sand's a little bit more digital. I have a few more patterns on the side. As a beginner, I think it's the Singer M340 is a great beginner inner machine. It doesn't have all these bells and whistles, but it does give you a really nice straight stitch to work with. Okay, so I just keep going that, and then once I've stitched that one up, I just come back to the first one, and now I'm going to clip that off. And I'll put that in, and I'll stitch across the line there. So why do I do that? Why do I keep them attached together? I do that because just from years of experience with a lot of different sewing machines, it's easier to keep track of your pieces. Number one, I know where my pieces are. They're usually attached together. But number two, it's if you get a bunching on your bobbin thread, having a little start on the thread will keep it from bunching up. So that's why I do that. And it's just sort of a habit I have of doing it that way. You could stitch up all from one material, one fabric, do both of the corners, and then do the next one. Either way, whatever works for you. Let's go put that under there. So I do keep my fingers on the outside, and I'm really just very gently pushing my fabric along, just guiding it. I'm not forcing it through. There's feed dogs underneath here that walk your fabric forward for you. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. You can just your goal is just to guide it straight across. Okay, and then once you've got both of those stitched up, I'm going to go ahead and trim those apart. So, all right. So now we can take out our, you can remove your pins because we're ready to work on our darts. So the darts are what gives your bowl that shape to hug your bowl. And to achieve the dart, what we're going to do is fold our fabric in half. And if you want, you can press it at this point, but you don't have to. We're going to fold it in half, marking the top together. So you can do that for both of your pieces. And we're going to mark a triangle on each folded edge, and we'll do that 4 times for each piece. So we'll do it on this folded edge, and then you'll open it and turn it and do it on this folded edge. Let me show you what it's going to look like when we're done, because what you're going to do is along the marks we're going to make, we're going to sew that down. And then when you open up your bowl, that's what gives it the form. But first we just have to do the marking. Now, the marking we're going to do today, we're going to go in 2 inches towards our cross here, where our lines cross. We're going to go in 2 inches and out 1 inch to the corner. So you'll measure and mark 1 inch out like this. So just mark that 1 inch out. Let's see that, you can't see it. You'll mark this 1 inch out. It's a little harder to see on this fabric. And then you'll mark it 2 inches in towards the center. Then we'll use your ruler and line up our markings, the 2 inch and the 1 inch, and you'll draw a straight line like that. Now, when we go to our sewing machine, we're going to stitch along that straight line. And you need to repeat this for each side of each fabric. So we'll do this one first, and then we'll do the other side. Now, I like to mark them all first so that it's so that I only am marking one time and I don't forget how to mark it. So I'll mark all of my different pieces at one time. And it's also a bit easier to do it with your fabric flat than if you stitch these up and then had to come back and open your fabric again and mark it again. So we're just going to take it and mark each side. And I know that looks really funny and you're like, what is it? That I did something wrong. You haven't done anything wrong. We're going to match that back up. and it will match up just perfectly when we get back to our machine. So go ahead and go 2 inches towards the center, 1 inch to the side, and go across. Now, I think I was working on another project, and I think I did my darts incorrectly, and I had them going the different directions, and it was okay because as long as I was consistent, my bowl turned out okay. So you see now we have these markings here, and it looks really weird, but we're going to continue to do that on the second piece. So we'll take this piece and again go 2 inches towards the center and mark it 1 inch towards the top. Now I will tell you, sometimes if I'm doing a lot of something very repetitive, I will take a sticky note or some sort of paper and I'll make that marking for myself. So this was another one I did where I did the corner. I marked the corner already and I knew, okay, I had to put that down towards the fold and then just draw that line. So you can always make yourself a little pattern if you want to make it a little easier. I'm always about the easy buttons. Okay, so we're going to go 2 inches here again and an inch over here. And then we'll go match these up. And then we're going to do the last set. Okay, so make sure you're marking up your top and your matching point here, all are matching up. Just your top and your matching point. Okay, so we can do that. And then again, we're just going to go 2 inches and then 1 inch up. Now, what I like to do when I get ready to go to my machine is I like to make sure that my darts are going to be sewn, like I'm going to remember where to sew my darts, okay? So by that, I mean, I might like put a little pin in it so I know, okay, this is the dart I'm sewing and this is how it goes together. Because what we're going to do is now that we've made all of our marks, we're going to come back and we'll sew along the fold. So you see you have one up top here. We're going to sew these two along the fold and then we'll open up our fabric, turn it over, and sew these two along this fold. But these will be folded and sewn already. So why don't you do one and you could see kind of how that works. And then if you have questions, you can ask me questions so everyone has a chance who's doing it, have a chance to catch up. So if you just want to watch on this first piece, and then I'll pause so we can ask some questions. So for this one, again, I just push my threads out of the way. Let me get this a little bit closer. And you can start either on the raw edge or the folded edge there, whichever you're most comfortable with. So we'll put that in the machine, put our pressure foot down, hold on to your little threads here, and just let it go. And you're going to follow that line. Now, if you have to be perfect, you know you don't. So don't stress about it, okay? If it's not exactly perfect, it's still going to be great. Okay, so I'm just going to do that one. And then I'm going to do the next one. So the next one I do need to do starting on the fold there. I don't have my little strings are too far away. Now, because we're making darts and we're not putting any stress on the darts, I'm not back stitching on anything. I'm just going from the start of the corner to the end. So now you can see my bowl is sort of starting to take shape. See how the darts are like, will pull up the sides. The darts will pull up the sides for you. So from here, we have the other side we need to do. And we're just going to match up those darts that we stitched and come back to the lines we drew, and we can stitch right across there again. So if you just want to watch how I do it, I just am stitching right across that dart, following my line and marked. I'm getting to the end. You're going to trim your fabric there. And then here we go here. And if you feel like you didn't get the back of, that little corner piece, you can always reverse your machine and say, you know what, let me just go back. I want to make sure I got that. Okay, I feel comfortable, I got that. And then you can just go forward. All right, now I'm gonna trim some of my fibers. If everybody wants to go ahead and cut those, stitch their darts, go ahead and do that now. Now is the time to do that. And I'm just gonna give a little trim here. I know my threads are going to be on the inside, so don't feel like you have to trim your threads. My sister always makes fun of me because she's a thread trimmer, and I'm always like, oh, it's on the inside, you'll never see it. All right, I cut corners, I guess. All right, so now that I have everything is stitched, I've got my darts done, I'm ready to go to my second piece and do the same thing on my second piece of fabric. So we're just gonna finish trimming that up. I've got all my threads are all trimmed up, and now you can see how those darts are really holding that shape. Okay, so we're going to take the next piece and do the same thing. Did anybody have any questions while we're working on this part?
We do have a few questions.
Okay.
Our first question is, how long is your stitch and what is the tension?
Oh, good question. I'm just doing a basic stitch. So it's whatever the basic stitch on your machine is, like the most commonly used stitch. And then my tension is on the auto. I find I don't really like to mess with my tension very often unless I feel like something is really off. So your tension isn't something that you usually normally have to adjust. And your stitch length, you can always make your stitch length shorter or longer, but I just use whatever the standard stitch length is. That's a really good question.
And another question for you is, are you using a longer basting stitch or a regular sewing stitch length?
We're using a regular sewing stitch length.
Okay. And then would you say that this is a good project for beginner sewers?
It's a great project for beginner sewers because, sometimes for beginners, we sort of like we don't know where to start. I think that's always, as a beginner, as you begin anything, it's sort of like, where do you start? I think starting with something like this is a great beginner project because you learn how to do darts, and it's not just a straight, you're not just making something straight, but you learn a lot of different types of different ways to stitch your fabric with this. So we're doing a little quilting, we're doing some forming, and then we're gonna do some top stitching and turning around and everything like that. So yes, this is a great project for beginners. And you have something you're gonna use, no matter how much you mess it up.
Somebody else is asking, how do you know how big to make it?
How do you know how big to make it? So the 10 by 10 size is like a really good generic bowl size. Most bowl koozies are made from a 10 by 10 piece of fabric, but then you can always, once you get the first one made and you sort of understand the concept, you can adjust it and make your fabric bigger. And I'll show you how to measure for that. And you can also adjust it and make your pocket, your darts longer so that your size of your pattern go up higher.
And then a couple more questions. How big do you make the darts? And is this a type of project that you have knots that you need to tie at the end of?
So you make your darts. Your darts are on each fold 2 inches in from the raw edge. So you go 2 inches towards the center and 1 inch up the side. That's how your dart is made. And on the top stitch, I will knot my top stitch thread, but the other threads I don't knot. Okay. So once you've marked and sewn your darts, the next step is we want to go ahead and trim the darts down. Now, the reason we're trimming the darts down is so that it makes it a little bit easier when we sew it together and you don't have bulk in there. Like if you just left that material there, it would get very bulky. So we want to go ahead and trim our darts down. And to trim your darts down, we're going to leave about 1/4 of an inch on each side to trim it down. So we're just going to go ahead and trim this down 1/4 of an inch. Now on the maker plate, I do have the how-to instructions on this. So you can always go there and see the instructions. And I actually have a PDF pattern included in there. If you use this pattern, you actually cut out the darts. You don't have to do the measuring, and you cut out the dart shape before sewing the dart up. So just so you know, if you want to give that method a try, that is an option for you. And it's the same size as what we're making today. Yeah. I do have to say though, sometimes I get a little confused and I cut the wrong thing off. So you want to make sure you cut the correct part of your pattern piece off. So I've trimmed off all of my dart pieces. Now I could use my iron and press the seams open so I get some nice seams here. So why don't I do that? Why don't I give everyone kind of a chance to catch up. You do not have to press your seams. Only press your seams if you so choose. It really won't make a huge difference. It does make it a little bit crisper, I think, so I like to press my seams. But this is sort of an awkward shape, and it's a little bit hard, not hard, but it can be a little bit more challenging to press. So sometimes I use my finger, but if you're working with kids or you don't want to use your finger underneath it, understandably, I'm just going to use a piece of wood here. So I just put my pattern here on the wood block, and I hold open that seam, and I can get right in there and press that seam down. So the block is just a thinner, and it's just a piece of wood. I just got it from my husband's workroom, and I've had it. It's a remnant of one of his projects, and I just had it in my sewing for a long time. And it's really good when you have to get a little piece and if you don't have a ham. A ham is what seamstresses use with wool to form different parts of the garment. It's called a ham. So if you don't have that, your little trusty little wood block will work, or you can do it right on your ironing board if you want to, or your ironing pad, or right on your finger. Sometimes in a pinch I do that. But you're just going to press those seams. So the reason I like doing the board is like if I do it down on my pad, I'm sort of pressing it on my other material. So I just kind of like to use that board and give it the separation. So we're just going to press open all of the different sides here. And you want it to leave about 1/4 of an inch. This one looks like you got a little bit too small. Little small my cut there, but you should have cut about 1/4 of an inch on each dart. Now darts in a garment are used to give your garment form. So if one of your future projects would be you want to make a blouse, but you want the blouse to be a little bit more fitted, like around your midriff area, you would add the darts in the garment in the front of your garment. You would add those darts, and that would give you a nice form for a blouse. So that's where you use darts in if you're making a garment. I'm looking up my camera lens here. Okay, so we're just going to do all 4 of these, and then we've done the first garment already. I think I got a little close on this, but it's okay. I didn't cut my seam, so my seam is still nice and intact. I didn't cut that. We are good to go there. All right. So once you have both of your pieces with your, let me get up a little bit higher here. Once you have both of your pieces with your darts and your seams are opened, and you can always come in here to impress on the inside here. Now we're going to stitch up the top of our pieces. So we have to nest them and put them together. And it doesn't really matter which way you go because we're going to turn it inside out anyway. So I'm going to take my top on my outer fabric and turn that inside out or right side out. and I'll nest that into my lining. I'm going to make sure my side seams all match up. So you want to, where you have a seam there, you want it to match with your inner seam. And if you have these wonder clips, this is a great spot to use the wonder clips. And you can just clip that together. If you have pins, go ahead and use your pins on the inside here and pin it right on the corners there. So we're just going to work it around, starting with our seams on the side. Now, if they don't match up, let's say they're not matching up, they're really off, take your finger on one point, put your finger on that point and come back and just make sure that your seams are lined up right at that point, and then you can come up and line up your seam that way. So we're just going to line up this seam here. All right. How's everybody doing? Now, you do have on a webinar, you have like a little thumbs up. I know if you're making with me, you may not be able to take your hands off your bowl koozie right now, but if you're watching, you're like, yeah, I get this, I'm following along. Give it a thumbs up and let me know how you guys are doing. Now we're going to come back to the points, and you want to line up your raw edges of your points here. Now you can use pins or you can use the clips, whichever way you'd like to go. We are going to do a stitch across the whole top of our bowl koozie. And what I recommend here is that when you're stitching and you're ready to turn the corner, where you have that stitch we made that went up the side there, you're going to put sink your needle right in that stitch and turn your fabric. So you do want to make sure your corners are lined up. If you're having a little bit of difficulty on the sides, let's say they're not lining up perfectly, go ahead and give it an extra little pin there if you need to. I don't know how many of you guys hold your pins with your mouth, but I do that frequently. Okay, so we're just going to pin that right there. I'm just going to give it a little extra encouragement to hold its position. And we're just going to walk our way around. Now, we do need to leave an opening to turn this inside out. So you want to make a mark where your opening is going to be. So I'll leave my opening right here. So I can take a pin and put it, you want about a 2-inch opening on the side here to make it easy to turn your bowl koozie inside out. So we've got the right sides are all pinned together and we're ready to start sewing again. And we're going to start at the bottom of our opening. We're going to start right here and do 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so I'm going to get my pins out of the way here. So from this spot right here, I'm just going to put it into my machine. I think I got to get my machine a little bit closer to me. All right, how's that? Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to, again, I'll use that 1/4 inch, and my foot over is 1/4 inch. So I will mark, I'll use the edge of the foot for my 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to start where my pin is. Now, if your machine has a way to drop your needle, you want to have it set to drop the needle. And what that means is you want the stitch to end with your needle in the material. So I'm just going to push my drop needle. And as I start to stitch, when I get to a seam, if I need to turn or rotate my fabric, I'm just going to drop my needle and then I'll be able to rotate my fabric and my needle will hold my fabric together. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to do 1/4 inch to the seam. Now my seam is, this is one of my tinier seams here. I want to make sure I get that as flat as possible. So I'll just use my little seam ripper there and I'll hold that down and press my foot back. When my needle gets to that seam, I'll stop. I'll pick up my foot and I'll pivot. Okay, and then I'll just realign my edges and make sure everything is lined up. And again, I'm keeping my fabric to the edge of my foot here. And we're just going to stitch it along. And then I'll stop again when I get to that top there. when I get to my stitch right there, I'll just stop right there. Now I should have mentioned, I would normally do where I started, I would back stitch a few times here to reinforce that. So I apologize, I didn't have you guys do that. We'll just be a little more gentle with that opening. So we're just gonna keep stitching until we get to that. I sink it and then I pin it. And when you pin it, you want to make sure your fabric still is in the 1/4 inch distance. And if you need to give it a little bit of an extra pull, go ahead and do that, like just a little. I shouldn't have to do much adjusting to it. It should stay pretty well aligned for you. Okay, so we just pick, just like on Friends. Pivot. I just get to that stitch, I pick up my foot and I turn my material. So I'm looking for my end point. It's going to be coming up soon. I'm going to make sure I don't miss it. So I think, yeah, this is my end point here. So I'm going to make sure I don't stitch over that end point. Take that out, and then I'll just do a little bit of a stitch and we'll do that back stitch here. So I'll just stitch to my pin marking here, and then I'll do the back stitch. Okay, and then I'll do a little front stitch. That just reinforces my opening. So as I turn my material, I won't tear my opening open. And if it does rip, if it like the stitches come loose a little bit, it's okay because we're going to top stitch the bowl cozy. All right, so fabulous, guys. I hope everyone's stitching along with me. We're doing a great job. So we can trim all of our little marks here. We'll just trim this on this side here and trim around. All right. Now I'm going to just turn it inside out. So I find my opening, and if this was my side, I didn't double reinforce. I'd want to be a little gentle. I think this is my side here. So I'm going to start from on this side and work my way around. Make sure you didn't leave any pins or clips in there. And then we're just going to start turning it. So, before we turn it, my bad. Before we turn it, you can trim along the top of each corner to make it a little bit easier and reduce the bulk in the corners. So you can just give that a little trim on there. It's like a 1/4 of an inch. You do not even have to do this if you don't want. If you're worried about getting into your stitches, then don't worry about doing that trim, but you can do that trim if you want, if you think that's going to make it easier. Okay, so now I'm just going to pick my corner. Now I stick my finger into the corner, and my remaining pointer finger, I'm just going to use that to dig in and begin to turn that inside out. So I'm going to move my way around the fabric, dig into that corner, and push that out of my hole. So now I've got half of my cozy is coming out like this, and we'll go back into these remaining holes once we get it through the remaining corners, once we get it through. So just be gentle with yourself and your project. You don't want to like rip it through and get angry that it's not going through. It's like just little bits of it will come through. So you just have to kind of get in there and grab it and pull it out. Okay, so we're just going to kind of keep moving that around and pulling that out like this. And you're just going to keep exposing it until it's all turned right side out. Now you see I have that deep pocket in there. That's one of my corners. So I'm going to stick my fingers into the hole, find that corner, use my thumb and my forefinger, my pointer fingers right here on this side, my middle finger, and then I'm just going to push that out. Now, if you have like a chopstick or you can take like the end of a pencil, something that is not too pointy. If you want to, if you don't feel like that came out strong enough for you, you can use that to go back in and push that out a bit more. I don't recommend using your scissors, but you can use a little pencil, a dull pencil can go into that corner if you wanted to. Chopstick works great, or a bone folder, that's a great tool to have to get your corners. There's even a Clover has a corner tool. It's on the supply list, and in the how-to, it has both of it there. What I find a lot of times just with my fingers is enough to get it out. Now we have this opening, so we're gonna have to address the opening, and that's easy. That's our last top stitch. So keep working that corner up as you go, like that. Okay, so now I have my 4 corners are pretty good shape. Let's get this guy out a little bit more. All right, so you've got your 4 corners, and you can kind of really see your bowl is almost done. We have one more step, and that's closing the hole with a top stitch. So before I close it though, I'll give it a good press and make sure that I can kind of make sure I've got a 1/4 of an inch pressed in on each of my materials, because I'm going to stitch that closed using a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Probably be a little bit smaller because it's top stitching. So when you top stitch, you can extend your length of your, sorry, I'm not sure. You can extend your stitch length to go a little bit longer if you wanted to give a top stitch, or you can, if you're a beginner, you may just keep it the same as when you started. If your machine has, you know, fancy stitches on it, that is a fun time to use a fancy stitch on this top stitch here if you want to. So I just want to make sure that all my right pieces are going to be in there. This is also a good time if you wanted to add a little, if you had some material left over. I don't have any material to show you, but you could make a little tab here so that you could hang your bowl in the kitchen, or have a little tag that you could put a spoon through if you wanted to. So you have your soup in a spoon. Nice. Now, and I also think these are fun. Like if you do a lot of Taco Tuesdays, or if you make chili frequently at home, then to use these bowl cozies, and you can even use that heat transfer vinyl and say, okay, this bowl is where we put the black olives. This is where we put the onions. This is where the sour cream goes. And then your bowl cozies are all labeled, and all you have to do is put the ingredients in the bowls and then set them out. So it kind of gives it like a little, if you had some like taco fabric or something, it'd be really cute. Another fun way to do this. I'm sure you guys can think of lots of fun ways to use these cozies. I think they're cute too, just to, if somebody's like wants to have a little bowl of chips or something, you could put little chips in there and sit down and watch your TV. Or like if you share a family bowl of popcorn, you could have everybody have their popcorn cozy and put a little popcorn in there. Whatever you want to do. Now, when you put your bowl in there, these little pieces, these flaps will fall down. Okay, so don't worry about that right now. What we need to do, our last stitch, is closing this up. Now you can use some seam tape, like heat and bond seam tape, if you didn't want to do a top stitch, but I'm just going to show you how I would do a top stitch. I'm just going to pin that with my little wonder clips here. And, you know, when I first got these little clips, I was like, oh, who needs wonder clips? I have straight pins. These just seem gimmicky. I love my wonder clips. I use them all the time, way more than I anticipated I would. But they're fun to have, and I like the colors. I don't know. They're way more helpful than I had anticipated they would be. Okay, so grab my machine back. So our last step is to do the top stitch. Now I'm just going to make sure that everything is lined up. Kind of want to keep that tucked under a little bit. Looks good. Okay, so I'm going to start not where my opening is. I'm just going to start at another little spot. And your top stitch, I like to do my top stitch an 1/8 of an inch from the top. You could also come down 1/4 of an inch, but I want to make sure that we get this closed. So I'm going to go down an 1/8 of an inch, and the 1/8 of an inch on my machine. So the edge of my presser foot here is the 1/4 of an inch. There's a little tiny opening right on my presser foot. So the inside of your presser foot to your needle should be an 1/8 of an inch, and that's pretty standard. Now we're going to want to sink our needle again because we're going to have to pivot at these corners, and then we're just going to stitch that straight line. So I'm going to sink it. Oops, I went a little too far. Just go back one. Okay, so you want to get your needle on your stitch line there as you sink it. So that's where you're going to pivot. Okay, let's just make sure that's my stitch up there. Yeah. I just want that to line up right perfectly, but if it doesn't, that's okay. All right. There we go. When we come to this little seam here, you're going to let your needle sink right into that seam, and then we'll pivot a little bit on the corner there. And then once you get to your stitching line on the top of each corner, that's where you want to let your needle sink down in, and it'll hold your fabric so you can turn it. And at our seam here, we're going to let it sink in. And any little thread like this, you can put those out at the end. One more little stitch. So every time I turn, I want to make sure that my fabric is lined up with that inside of my presser foot there. And I do want to show everybody how to measure your bowl to make a future one that maybe is a different size. You need a different size. We can do that. Now, before I go too far, here's where I started my stitch. And what I want to do is pull on, it already came through. What I like to do is pull on my thread, my bobbin thread or my top thread. And what will happen is you'll start to get a little bit of a loose fiber there. And you can take your seam ripper and kind of nudge that a little bit. And what happens is you can use this thread that you've loosened up, and we're going to pull the we want to pull the bobbin thread to the front so that they're both on the same side. Mine already came through a little bit, so it's a little bit awkward job here. And the reason I do this is I just want to have a clean cut. Somebody had asked about tying this off. This is where you could tie it off if you felt like you needed to. I'm just going to trim these off. I don't usually tie them off, but if you want to, if you're like, oh, I want to make sure that that's going to hold, you can tie that off. I just like to pull it to the other side so that it's nice and neat. And so we're just going to go like this. Again, we've got one more little pivot. There. Okay, and then pivot. And then right when I get to my stitching line there, I can stop. I can go back if I want to make sure that I get, I have a good closure there. And then I'm done. Take my needle out. And there we go. Take this off, and I'll do that pulling the thread out again. I can show you how I do that. So you just take your material, and I have one thread on one side and the other thread on one side, and you just pull on one, and it loosens it up. don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Kind of loosens that up a bit. And so we'll just pull on this thread, make that little loop there. So you hold your thread end and the loop, and you bring up your bobbin thread. And then you can trim both of those right there, tie them off if you want to. And there you go. There is our soup bowl cozy. All right. Now, if you want to switch to the overhead, the face camera, I can show you how to measure. I'll show you how to measure the other. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so if you have other bowls that you want to make, and who doesn't have more bowls, little bowls, big bowls that you want to make, what you want to do is get the right fit. So a bowl like this that's taller and narrow, I might do a 10-inch by 10-inch square, but I would make my darts deeper in because I want it to be taller. This bowl here fits very snugly into my soup bowl cozy, and I don't need to do anything to it. It fits right in there. Now, if you measure the side of the bowl, remember we went 2 inches in. The side of the bowl should be about 4 inches. And on mine, it is 3.5 inches. So it gives me a little bit of extra room there. This bowl, which is much taller, is 4 inches. So I would do probably a 3-inch dart to go bigger. But to know what size square I need, you just take your bowl and measure from one side to the other side and add 1/2 inch. So this bowl measures 10 inch, not 1/2 inch, add 1 inch. This bowl measures 10 inches from one side to the other side. So if I were to make a soup bowl cozy for this bowl, I would make an 11-inch square out of my main fabric, 10-inch square out of my batting, and then my dart, I would make a deeper dart because I want the side to come up higher. So instead of this dart, which was 2 inches here, I would make my dart more like 3 inches. So it would be a deeper dart, and it would come up higher on the bowl. Something like this guy, he measures across 8.5 inches. So my fabric would be 9.5 inches, with my batting being 8.5 inches, and I would keep the same size dart. You go a little bit smaller, but that dart size is a good dart depth on this bowl. So it all depends on what size you're trying to do. Like this guy here, this was a 10-inch piece of material, and I made my dart 3 inches up by 2.5 inches wide. So the wider the dart, and the longer towards the center, the higher the dart will be. So it just get to play around a little bit with it. You can take material and drape it. So now we can get into a little draping. Let me grab, I have material just cut. I had some just cut. Here we go. This is just cut. I'm going to show you how you can drape it on your bowl. So if you take like this tall bowl here, and I turn it upside down, and I've got a 10-inch piece of material, I can put it over the edge, and you're going to put those darts in to your garment, so you can kind of see how big your darts need to be on either side. So I could pin it and just give that a try. So you could just take up your pins and pin it. And so I drape it that way and turn it. So see how that's draped? Pull that back a little bit. And then I would just do the same thing on this side and check my drapes. Now I probably need a little bit bigger piece. I think this bowl was a 10.5 or 11-inch fabric. So I just have those darts there. On each side I have my darts. Then I would open it up and see how big the darts were. So I'd match them up, match your fabric up like this, kind of get an idea and see how deep your darts would go. So this one is probably, let's see how big it was. And then you do the same size. You wouldn't make them different sizes. Once you figured out one side, you wouldn't change it for the different sizes. So if I wanted to make this dart here, this would be my triangle shape. I'd go from this point to the point where it was at the bowl. So I would just grab it and I would, I had it with my finger, but it's so it's 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch in from the center fold, and it would be 2 1/2, 2 3/4 up the side of the bowl. So that's how I would find my dart on any given bowl that you have that you want to do it with. You could find your dart that way. So find how much fabric you need, add a yard, add an inch, and then pin it. And you just pin it. Turn your bowl upside down. Drape your square on your fabric. And then you can say like, oh, I know how to drape. We're just going to drape your fabric on there. Find your middle, right? Keep your middles, and then you'll just decide how big your dart needs to be, and pin it and measure it that way. Before we head out, were there any other questions we didn't get to?
We do have a few questions.
Okay.
So the first question being what is the weight of the batting that you're using? And the other question. Sorry?
Oh, it's 100% cotton batting. The Heat and Zap is what it's called. I don't know what the weight of it is, but that's a great question. You can look
the
at
other
the
question
package
that we have is, are these machine washable and dryable?
Absolutely. You've been working with 100% cotton. It is all machine washable and dryable. If you were in the kitchen and you got chili on or something like that, you could probably take it right over to the sink and just wash it by hand like that and let it dry and be fine. But I think you could also, the intent is to be able to throw them in the washing machine as well.
Sounds good. I think that's about it.
All right, great. And did you, I think we were going to put the link to the how-to in the Maker's Mart. So if anybody wants to download that pattern, it gives you the step outs, and then also it gives you the PDF pattern to be able to cut out your designs. And yeah, that's everything.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You do the same. Bye, everybody.